On the day my grandfather died, my sister arrived at my office with 4 lawyers. She did not knock. She did not wait for my assistant to announce her. She simply kicked the glass door open and marched in like she owned the entire Chicago skyline. She threw a stack of legal documents onto my desk, nearly knocking over my tea. "Sign over Grandpa Henry's estate or face court, little bloodless sis." Her voice was loud enough to turn heads in the hallway. Her husband Jamal stood behind her, adjusting his expensive tie, looking at me with the smug expression of a man who thinks he has already won. I calmly poured myself a fresh cup of tea. I let them talk. I let them threaten. I let them scream about undue influence and blood rights. Then I looked at my watch and said, "Sure, everything will be settled tomorrow morning at the mansion. 9 a.m. sharp. Do not be late." My sister Bianca blinked, her mouth hanging open. She expected a fight. She expected tears. She did not expect me to smile. What she did not know was that I had been preparing for this moment for 5 years. Before I tell you exactly how I wiped that smirk off her face, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a family that treated you like an outsider. My name is Evelyn. I am 32 years old and I am a crisis manager for some of the biggest corporations in America. My job is to fix disasters, but the biggest disaster of my life has always been my own family. I was adopted by Richard and Susan when I was 3 years old. They wanted a perfect family photo. But when they had their biological daughter Bianca 3 years later, I became a prop, a background character, and eventually, an obstacle. The invasion of my office was just the climax of a 72-hour nightmare. To understand why I was so calm, you have to understand what happened 3 days earlier at my grandfather Henry's funeral. It was a cold Tuesday in Chicago, the kind of gray day where the wind cuts right through your coat. I arrived at the funeral home early to ensure the flowers were arranged the way Grandpa liked them. White lilies, no roses. He hated roses. I had spent the last 6 months living in his guest room, changing his sheets, feeding him broth with a spoon, and holding his hand through the morphine hazes of stage 4 pancreatic cancer. I was the one who was there when he took his last breath. But when I walked into the chapel, my name was not on the front row seating chart. The front row was reserved for the family: Richard, Susan, Bianca, and Jamal. People who had not visited Grandpa Henry in 5 years. People who were vacationing in Cabo while he was dying and only flew back when the lawyer called to say it was over. I found my seat in the back row next to Mrs. Higgins, the housekeeper. She squeezed my hand, her eyes full of pity. "Look at them," she whispered, "like vultures circling a carcass." I looked. Bianca was wearing a black designer dress that was cut too low for a funeral, holding a tissue to dry eyes. She held her phone up subtly, live-streaming her grief to her 2 million followers. I could see the comments rolling in on her screen. "So brave. Stay strong, Queen." My parents sat next to her, looking solemn and dignified. They were playing the role of grieving children perfectly. After the service, we moved to the reception hall. I tried to stay in the corner, but I overheard my mother talking to one of Grandpa's old business partners. The man was asking about me. "I recall Henry mentioning a granddaughter who took care of him," the man said. "Is that her over there?" My mother laughed, a high, brittle sound. "Oh, that is Evelyn. She is adopted. We essentially hired her to move in and look after Dad so we would not have to put him in a home. Think of her as a very expensive live-in nurse. It saved us the trouble of hiring strangers." I froze. My hand gripped my glass so hard I thought it might shatter. A nurse, not a daughter, not a granddaughter, just help. My father chimed in, swirling his scotch. "Exactly. We wanted to keep the assets in the bloodline, you understand. Evelyn knows her place. She was compensated with free rent for a few years. That is more than enough." I walked away before I could scream. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. They did not see me as a person. They saw me as a utility, a placeholder until the bank accounts unlocked. When I came back out, Bianca had cornered me. She smelled like expensive perfume and selfishness. Jamal was hovering behind her, looking at his phone. "So, Evelyn," Bianca said, looking me up and down with a sneer. "I hope you have started packing. Mom and Dad are letting me and Jamal move into the mansion next week. We need the space. And frankly, the place smells like old people and medicine. We are going to gut it." "You are going to renovate Grandpa's house?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Renovate is a nice word," Jamal laughed. He was a real estate lawyer, mediocre at best, but ambitious. "We are going to flip it. The market is hot. That land is worth $25 million. We already have a developer interested in the estate for a luxury condo project." "You are selling the estate?" I asked. "Grandpa built that house with his own hands 50 years ago. He wanted it preserved." "Grandpa is dead," Bianca snapped. "And you are just the adopted help. Do not pretend you have a say in this. The will is being read on Friday. Until then, stay out of my way." I did not say a word. I just nodded and walked out of the reception. I did not go back to my apartment. I went straight to the mansion. I needed to gather my things. I needed to retrieve the documents Grandpa had entrusted to me. But when I pulled up to the iron gates of the estate that night, my remote clicker did not work. The gate did not open. I frowned and tried again. Nothing. The rain was starting to fall, heavy sheets of water hammering against my windshield. I got out of the car and walked to the pedestrian gate. It was padlocked with a new heavy chain. "What are you doing?" a voice shouted from the balcony above. I looked up. My mother was standing on the second-floor balcony, holding an umbrella, looking down at me like I was a stray dog. "I live here, Mom," I shouted over the rain. "Open the gate." "Not anymore," she yelled back. "We changed the locks an hour ago. This is family property now. We cannot have you sneaking around stealing silver or manipulating documents before the reading of the will." "I am not stealing anything," I screamed, the rain soaking through my coat. "My clothes are in there, my laptop, my life. We packed it for you," she said, gesturing to the wet grass outside the gate. I looked down. There in the mud were 3 garbage bags. One was ripped open, spilling my clothes onto the soaked earth. My framed photo of me and Grandpa Henry lay face down in a puddle. "You cannot do this," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "I have residency rights. I have lived here for 5 years. I paid the property taxes for the last 2 years because Dad said he was liquidating assets." "That was just rent, sweetheart." My father's voice joined her. He stepped out onto the balcony, swirling a glass of Grandpa's vintage wine. The wine Grandpa had been saving for my wedding. "You were a tenant, and now your lease is up." Bianca appeared between them. She was wearing one of Grandma's pearl necklaces. "Go away, bloodless," she jeered. "Go find a shelter, or go back to whatever agency we bought you from." Jamal stepped out last. He looked uncomfortable, but he did not stop them. "Legally, Evelyn," he shouted down, trying to sound authoritative. "Without a written lease, you are a guest at will. We have revoked that will. If you try to enter, I will call the sheriff for trespassing. You do not want an arrest record in your line of work." I stood there in the rain for a full minute. I looked at the garbage bags in the mud. I looked at the family that had raised me, standing on the balcony of the man who had actually loved me, drinking his wine and laughing at my misery. I did not cry. Tears are for people who have hope that the other person cares. I had no such hope. I bent down and picked up the photo of Grandpa Henry. I wiped the mud off the glass. It was the only thing I took. I left the clothes. I left the laptop. I left the garbage bags where they lay. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of them on the balcony. Then I took a picture of my belongings in the mud. I got back into my car. My hands were trembling, not from cold but from adrenaline. I drove to a hotel downtown. I sat on the edge of the bed and dialed a number I had memorized but never used. It was the private number of Arthur Sterling, Grandpa Henry's personal attorney and oldest friend. "Arthur," I said when he answered. "It is Evelyn. Initiate the Omega Protocol." There was a pause on the other end. Then Arthur's gravelly voice said, "Are you sure, Evelyn? Once we start this, there is no going back." They will be left with nothing. I looked at the mud on my hands. I thought about Bianca calling me bloodless. I thought about my mother calling me a hired nurse. I'm sure I said, "I want the meeting at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Bring the red file." That brings us back to my office. The morning after the eviction. The morning Bianca kicked my door open. She was pacing around my office now, picking up my awards and sneering at them. Crisis Manager of the Year. Cute. But can you manage being homeless, sis? Jamal placed the document in front of me again. "Look, Evelyn," he said, softening his tone, trying to play the good cop. "We are not unreasonable. We know you took care of the old man. If you sign this waiver giving up any claim to the estate and confirm that you have not hidden any assets, we will cut you a check. $50,000. It is a lot of money for someone like you." "Someone like me?" I asked, sipping my tea. "You know," Bianca laughed, "someone with no real roots, no real family. You can take that money and go find your real parents. Maybe they want you. Although I doubt it." My father and mother walked in then. They had been parking the car. They looked around my office with disdain. "Still working in this glass cage," my father said. "You should have gone into real estate like Jamal. Real wealth is in property, not in fixing other people's mistakes." They sat down on my leather sofa without asking. "So did she sign?" My mother asked, checking her makeup in a compact mirror. "We have a meeting with the Ferrari dealership at noon. Bianca wants to trade in Henry's vintage Rolls-Royce." "Not yet," Jamal said. "She is being stubborn." I put my teacup down. The sound echoed in the silent room. "I am not being stubborn," I said. "I am being patient." "Patient for what?" Bianca snapped. "For you to finish digging your own graves," I said. They laughed. It was a loud, ugly sound. "Honey," my father said, "we hold all the cards. We are the biological heirs. We have the dihydrogen oxide. I mean the blood. You have nothing." I stood up. I smoothed my skirt. I looked at each of them in the eye. "Tomorrow," I said, 9 a.m., at the mansion. I will have my lawyer present. If you want me to sign, bring the deed to the house, the titles to the cars, and the access codes to the bank accounts. I want to see exactly what I am giving up." Bianca's eyes lit up with greed. She thought I was folding. She thought I wanted to see the treasure before I walked away. "Fine," she said. "We will bring everything, just so you can see how rich we are and how poor you are." They left as loudly as they came. Bianca swiped a pen from my desk as she walked out. A petty theft from a petty person. I sat back down. I opened my laptop. On the screen was a complex financial diagram. It was the map of my grandfather's empire, but it was not a map of treasure. It was a map of landmines, and tomorrow I was going to watch them step on every single one of them. I slept like a baby that night. I woke up at 6 a.m., went for a run, and put on my sharpest suit. White. The color of mourning in some cultures, but for me the color of a clean slate. I arrived at the mansion at 8:55. The gate was open. There were 4 luxury cars in the driveway, a Porsche, a Mercedes, and 2 BMWs. They had already started spending money they did not have. I walked up the steps. The front door was open. I could hear champagne corks popping inside. I walked into the grand living room. They had moved the furniture. The antique sofas were pushed against the walls. In the center of the room was a large table covered in blueprints. Bianca was holding a glass of champagne. Jamal was pointing at the blueprints. "We tear down the east wing," he was saying. "Put in an infinity pool. It will increase the value by 3 million. "Evelyn," my mother called out from the bar. "You are early. Want a drink?" "Oh wait, this is Crystal. Plastic cups are in the kitchen." I ignored her. I walked to the head of the table. Arthur Sterling walked in behind me. He was carrying 2 large briefcases, one red, one black. "Who is the old guy?" Bianca asked. "This is the executor of the estate," I said. "And my lawyer." Jamal scoffed. "We have our own lawyers." He pointed to the 4 men in suits sitting on the couch. "Good," Arthur said, his voice deep and rumbling. They will understand the terminology. Arthur placed the black briefcase on the table. He opened it. It was empty except for a single thin file. Is that it? My father asked. Where are the bonds? The gold certificates? Henry said he had millions in bonds. Arthur slid the file across the table. This, Arthur said, is the consolidated financial report of the Henry estate. As of this morning. Bianca grabbed it. She flipped through the pages. Her brow furrowed. I do not understand, she said. What are all these minus signs? Jamal snatched the file from her. He read the first page. His face went pale. He flipped to the second page. His hands started to shake. He looked up at me, sweat beading on his forehead. This cannot be right, he whispered. What my mother demanded. What is it? Jamal dropped the file. It hit the table with a dull thud. It is debt, he choked out. It is all debt. What do you mean debt? My father shouted. The house, the cars, the land. Mortgaged, Arthur said calmly. All of it. Henry leveraged everything 10 years ago. Leveraged for what? Bianca screamed. To save your company, Richard, I said, looking at my father. 10 years ago, when you ran your business into the ground, Grandpa bailed you out. He mortgaged the mansion. He mortgaged the farm. He took out loans against the car collection. He spent $15 million to cover your embezzlement charges so you would not go to prison. The room went dead silent. My father turned gray. He never told me he mortgaged the house, my father stammered. He just gave me the money. He gave you his life's work, I said. And you spent the last decade traveling and buying watches, while he paid the interest. But the principal is still there. And it is due. Arthur pointed to a clause in the file. The loans are structured as balloon payments. They trigger upon the death of the primary borrower. That means the debt is due, today. How much? Bianca whispered. $18 million, Arthur said. Bianca screamed. It was a primal sound. She looked at Jamal. You said we were rich. You said I could quit my job. We can sell the house, Jamal said frantically. We can sell the cars. You cannot, Arthur said. The bank holds the liens. The equity is negative. The house is worth maybe $12 million in this market. The debt is 18. If you accept the inheritance, you accept the debt. You will be underwater by $6 million instantly. My mother collapsed onto the sofa. My Ferrari, she whimpered. We put a deposit on a Ferrari this morning. You better get that deposit back, I said coldly. So there is nothing, Bianca hissed, tears streaming down her face. He left us nothing. Oh, he left plenty, I said. I nodded to Arthur. He reached for the red briefcase. Grandpa Henry did not just pay off Dad's debts, I said. He invested. He believed in science. He believed in the future. The money he borrowed against this house went into a biotech research firm. Arthur opened the red briefcase. He pulled out a thick bound document with a gold seal. This, Arthur said, is the patent registration for a new oncology drug. It was approved by the FDA 2 years ago. It is currently the leading treatment for the type of cancer that killed Henry. My family froze. Greed replaced the fear in their eyes instantly. So we are rich, Bianca gasped. The drug. We own the drug. Arthur shook his head. No. Henry did not own the drug in his own name. He knew that if he did, Richard would sell it, or Bianca would leverage it for a lifestyle brand. Then who owns it? Jamal demanded. It is part of the estate. We are the heirs. 5 years ago, Arthur said, his voice ringing through the room. On the night you kicked Evelyn out into the snow because she refused to let you borrow money in her name. Do you remember that? I remembered. I was 27. I had just gotten my first big bonus. My parents demanded it. I said no. They changed the locks. I slept in my car for a week. That night, Arthur continued. Henry came to my office. He created a blind trust. He transferred all intellectual property rights of the research to that trust. And who is the beneficiary of the trust? My mother asked, her voice trembling. Arthur looked at me. I stood up. I walked over to the table. I picked up the gold-sealed document. I said. The silence was heavier this time. It was the silence of a guillotine blade hanging in the air. You, Bianca whispered. Grandpa knew you would tear each other apart for the money, I said. He knew you only cared about the appearance of wealth, not the work. He gave me the intellectual property because I was the only one who asked him about his research. I was the only one who drove him to the lab. I was the only one who cared. How much? Jamal asked. His voice was hoarse. How much is it worth? The royalties last year were $15 million, Arthur said. The valuation of the patent is currently $200 million. $200 million. My mother made a sound like a wounded animal. My father looked like he was having a stroke. But that is our money, Bianca shrieked. We are the blood. We are the family. She is just a stray. The stray owns the kibble now, Bianca, I said. Then the begging began. It was pathetic. It was exactly what I expected. My mother lunged for me. Evelyn, baby, she cried, grabbing my arm. We are family. We raised you. We took you in when no one wanted you. You cannot leave us with this debt. You have to help us. Pay off the house. Please. I pulled my arm away. I brushed the spot where she touched me as if it were dirty. Yesterday I was a hired nurse, I said. Yesterday I was bloodless. Today I am family because I have a checkbook. We made mistakes, my father pleaded. We were stressed. We love you, Evelyn. We always have. I looked at him. I looked at the man who stood on the balcony and told me I was a tenant. I do not believe you, I said. Jamal stepped forward. Evelyn, listen to reason. If you do not pay the debt, the bank takes the house. This is your grandfather's legacy. You cannot let them take it. I smiled. It was the smile I had practiced in the mirror. Actually, I said, that is exactly the plan. What Bianca asked. I am not paying your debt, I said. I am letting the bank foreclose. You cannot. My mother screamed. We live here. Not for long, I said. The foreclosure process starts when the heir rejects the inheritance or fails to service the debt. Since you cannot pay $18 million, the bank will seize the property. And then I continued, leaning in close to Bianca. Then I will buy it back. Buy it back, she whispered. At auction, I said. Distressed property. I will probably get it for $10 million. I will use my first year's royalty check. I will buy Grandpa's house free and clear, and you will not get a dime. You monster! Bianca screamed. She raised her hand to slap me. Jamal caught her wrist. Don't, he hissed. Do not make it worse. It is already worse, I said. I looked at my watch. It is 10 a.m. The bank has been notified of Henry's death. The loans are in default as of now. I picked up my purse. I nodded to Arthur. You have about an hour before the bank representatives arrive to inventory the assets, I said. I suggest you grab your fake Louis Vuitton bags and get out. Anything left in the house when they lock the doors becomes property of the bank. And eventually, property of me. I turned to leave. Evelyn, wait. My mother wailed. Where will we go? We sold our condo to move in here. We have nowhere. I stopped at the door. I looked back at them. The family that had tormented me for 3 decades. The family that valued blood over love and money over loyalty. There is a nice shelter downtown, I said. Or maybe you can find a generous family to take you in. I hear they are looking for hired help. I walked out the door. The sun was shining. The air was crisp. I heard screaming from inside the house. I heard the crash of something breaking. I got into my car. Arthur got into his. Did we do the right thing? Arthur asked through the window. I looked at the mansion. I looked at the balcony where they had stood in the rain. We did the only thing, I said. 6 months later, I sat on that same balcony. I was drinking tea. The house was quiet. I had bought it from the bank for 9 million. A bargain. I had turned the East Wing into the headquarters for the Henry Foundation. We provided grants for foster children who wanted to study science. Bianca was working at a mall kiosk, selling phone cases. Jamal had divorced her and moved to another state to avoid her debts. My parents were living in a one-bedroom apartment above a garage. They sent me letters every week. I never opened them. I took a sip of tea. It tasted like victory. It tasted like peace. It tasted like home. The heavy oak doors slammed shut, locking out the storm, and more importantly, locking out me. Inside, the air was still thick with the scent of lilies from the funeral, but Richard was already busy replacing it with the smell of greed. Finally, my mother Susan sighed, kicking off her heels and letting them drop onto the antique Persian rug that was worth more than her entire wardrobe. I thought she would never leave. Did you see the look on her face, like a kicked puppy? She is not a puppy, Susan, my father Richard muttered, struggling with the cork of a dusty wine bottle. She is a leech, but leeches fall off when you apply a little heat. Pop. The sound echoed through the cavernous living room of the estate. It was a Chateau Margaux 1982, my grandfather Henry's favorite. He had been saving it for a special occasion, perhaps my wedding or the birth of a great-grandchild. He certainly had not saved it for his son to guzzle straight from the bottle like a frat boy on spring break. "Pour me some," Bianca demanded, extending a crystal flute she had plucked from the display cabinet. "I need to wash the taste of poverty out of my mouth. Being around Evelyn is exhausting. She drains the energy right out of the room." "She drains the bank accounts is what she does," Jamal added, loosening his tie and sinking into grandfather's leather armchair. He put his feet up on the mahogany coffee table, leaving a scuff mark. "But not anymore. Tomorrow we take back what is ours." The storm raged outside, rain lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows, but inside the atmosphere was manic. It was the hysteria of people who had been holding their breath for years and were finally inhaling. They were not mourning. They were calculating. Bianca pulled out her phone, her thumbs flying across the screen. "Okay, I just got off the phone with a collector in Miami," she announced, her eyes gleaming with a feverish light. "He says if the '67 Shelby GT 500 is in mint condition, he can wire $250,000 by noon tomorrow." I sent him the photos I took in the garage while everyone was at the funeral. "You are selling the Shelby?" my father asked, pausing mid-sip. "Henry loved that car. He restored it himself." "Henry is dead, Dad," Bianca snapped. "And my Amex Black Card is very much alive and screaming. I am maxed out. $200,000 in debt. Do you know what the interest rate is? It is criminal. I need that cash liquid and I need it yesterday. Besides, I cannot drive a manual transmission. It is useless to me." "You cannot sell the car yet," Jamal warned, though his tone lacked conviction. "We have to wait for probate. Technically, the title has not transferred." "Technically, you are a lawyer, so fix it," Bianca shot back. "Draft a bill of sale. Backdate it. I do not care. I am not losing my apartment in the city because of a paperwork delay. That car is my ticket to freedom." My mother waved her hand dismissively, the wine splashing over the rim of her glass and staining the rug. "Small thinking, Bianca. That car is pocket change. The real money is in the land." She walked over to the window, staring out at the darkness where the family farm stretched for acres. "I was reading about this new crypto opportunity. Metaverse real estate backed by physical agricultural assets. It is going to explode. If we liquidate the North Pasture, say 40 acres, we could put 3 million into the initial coin offering." "Susan, please," my father groaned. "No more internet coins. Remember the last time?" "This is different, Richard," she shrieked, her veneer of elegance cracking instantly. "This is legitimate. And we need the multiplier. Do you think your pension is going to keep us in this lifestyle? We need to turn Henry's dirt into digital gold. I have already emailed the broker. He is drafting the listing agreement for the land." "You are all moving too slow," Jamal interjected, standing up and pacing the room. He looked like a shark in a suit that was slightly too tight. Cars, crypto. It is all small potatoes. The mansion itself is the leverage. He gestured to the grand walls around them. I had my firm run a preliminary valuation. This zip code, it is on fire. But we do not sell. We refinance. We take a cash-out mortgage against the equity, 15 million conservative estimate. I can inject 5 million into my firm, expand to New York, and we live off the rest. We use the house to pay for the house. It is free money. I like that. My father nodded, his greed overriding his caution. Free money. That sounds like Henry. He always said, make your money work for you. Henry said work for your money, Richard. My mother corrected, giggling drunk. But who cares what he said? He left it all to us, to the bloodline. To us. Bianca toasted, clinking her glass against Jamal's. To the bloodline. And to Evelyn for keeping the seat warm. Speaking of Evelyn, Jamal said, his brow furrowing. Did she seem too calm to you today? Most people would have screamed. She just poured tea. She is in shock, Bianca scoffed. She knows she is beaten. She is probably crying in some motel room right now, realizing she has to get a real job. Crisis manager. Please, the only crisis she has is her wardrobe. I do not know, Jamal muttered. She asked for the meeting at the mansion. She wanted us to bring the deeds, the titles. Why? To say goodbye, obviously. My father said, pouring himself a third glass. She wants closure. She wants to touch the leather seats of the Shelby one last time before Bianca ships it to Miami. Let her have her moment. It makes us look benevolent. Benevolent, my mother mused, tasting the word. I like that. We will give her the 50,000, maybe even 60. We can write it off as a charitable donation. The Evelyn Fund for Wayward Adoptees. They all laughed again. It was the laughter of people who thought they were standing on a mountain of gold, unaware they were actually standing on a trapdoor. I am going to check the safe, Bianca said, suddenly, her eyes narrowing. Grandpa always kept cash in the wall safe in the study. And Mom's jewelry, the sapphire necklace. I want to wear it to the signing tomorrow. It will send a message. Good idea, Richard said. I think he kept the bonds in there too, bearer bonds, untraceable. They scrambled toward the study like children running for a piñata. The dignity of the funeral was long forgotten. The grief was non-existent. There was only the hunger. Bianca reached the study first. She threw open the heavy oak door and marched to the painting of the hunt scene behind the desk. She swung the frame aside. What the hell? She screamed. The others rushed in. The wall safe was open. The door was hanging ajar. It is empty, Bianca shrieked, reaching her hand into the dark metal void. There is nothing here, no cash, no jewelry, no bonds. It is dusted clean. Evelyn, my mother hissed, her face twisting into a mask of pure venom. That little thief, she emptied it. She knew we were coming. She stole our inheritance, Richard roared, slamming his fist onto the antique desk. She has been looting the place under our noses. I knew it, Jamal said, pulling out his phone. I told you she was too calm. She has the assets. She is sitting on a pile of cash and diamonds while we argue about selling used cars. Call the police, Susan demanded. Have her arrested tonight. No, Jamal said, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Not the police. Not yet. We handle this in the court of public opinion first. Bianca, get your phone. We are going to ruin her before the sun comes up. Bianca wiped her eyes, though there were no tears, only rage. She unlocked her phone and opened her social media app. She hit the record button. Hey guys, she said, her voice instantly dropping into a sad, trembling register, a perfect performance of a grieving granddaughter. I did not want to do this. I really didn't. But my heart is broken. My grandfather just died, and we just found out that his caretaker has looted his home. The jewelry he meant for me gone. Please pray for my family. We just want justice. She posted the video. Then she looked up at her family, her eyes cold and hard. She wants a meeting tomorrow, Bianca sneered. I will give her a meeting. I am going to make sure she leaves this house in handcuffs. They poured more wine. They toasted to their revenge. They drank to their victory. They had no idea that the safe was empty, not because I had stolen from it, but because it had been empty for 10 years. They had no idea that the wine they were drinking was the only valuable thing left in the house. They celebrated late into the night, drunk on arrogance and vintage grapes, unaware that the paper they held in their hands, the will they thought was their ticket to paradise, was actually a subpoena for a lifetime of debt. The sound of the drill biting into the steel lock of my grandfather's wall safe screamed through the silent house. My father Richard was sweating, his face red with exertion and greed as he pressed his weight against the heavy tool. Beside him, my mother Susan held a flashlight with trembling hands, not out of fear, but out of anticipation. They believed that behind that small metal door lay the answer to all their problems. They believed it held stacks of cash gold bars and the bearer bonds Henry had spoken of decades ago. They had spent the last hour trying birthdays and anniversaries to guess the combination, but I had changed it 3 years ago at Henry's request when his memory began to fade. I was the only one who knew the code, and I was the only one they had kicked out. Finally, with a sickening crack, the locking mechanism gave way. Jamal stepped forward and used a crowbar to pry the heavy door open. The metal groaned in protest, a sound that felt like the house itself was crying out against this violation. Bianca pushed past her husband, her acrylic nails clicking against the metal as she reached into the dark void. "Jackpot," she whispered, her voice trembling. But then silence. A long, heavy silence that stretched until it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "There is nothing here," Bianca said, her voice flat. "What do you mean nothing?" my father demanded, shoving her aside to look for himself. He thrust his hand into the safe feeling around the corners, patting the metal shelf. He pulled his hand back out, covered only in a thin layer of gray dust. "It is empty," he roared, kicking the heavy oak desk in frustration. "It is completely empty. Where is the cash? Where are the bonds? Henry told me in '98 that he kept 50,000 in emergency cash in here. That was 20 years ago, Richard." My mother snapped, panic rising in her voice. She began pulling books off the shelves, shaking them upside down, looking for hidden envelopes. "He must have moved it. He must have hidden it somewhere else." "No," Bianca said slowly, turning around. Her eyes were wide, not with shock, but with a dawning malicious realization. "She did not hide it. She stole it." Evelyn, Jamal said, nodding as if it all made sense. "That is why she was so calm today. That is why she let us kick her out without a fight. She had already cleaned him out." My mother gasped, clutching her chest. "That ungrateful little leech. She spent 5 years living here for free, pretending to be a nurse, pretending to care, just so she could loot the place before he was even cold in the ground." "She stole my inheritance," Bianca shrieked. "That money was mine. Those bonds were mine. She is a thief, a common criminal." "Call the police," my father yelled. "I want her arrested tonight." "No," Jamal interrupted, his lawyer instincts kicking in, though they were twisted by malice. "If we call the police now, it becomes a long investigation. We need leverage. We need to destroy her credibility before the meeting tomorrow. We need to make sure that when she walks into this house at 9 a.m., she is so broken she will sign anything just to make it stop." Bianca smiled, and it was the ugliest thing I had ever seen. She pulled out her phone. The same phone she used to curate her perfect fake life for 3 million followers. "I know exactly what to do," she said. "I was sitting in my penthouse apartment 20 miles away when it happened. I had not told them about this place. They thought I lived in a studio or slept in my car. They did not know that while they were vacationing on my grandfather's dime, I had built a crisis management firm that billed $2,000 an hour. I was drinking a glass of water, looking out at the city lights when my phone on the marble kitchen island buzzed. Then it buzzed again, and again. Within 10 seconds, it was vibrating so hard it was moving across the counter. It sounded like an angry hornet trapped in a jar. I picked it up. My notifications were exploding. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. I opened Instagram, and there it was. A video posted by Bianca just 3 minutes ago. It already had 50,000 views. In the video, Bianca was sitting on the floor of my grandfather's study, right in front of the broken safe. She had messed up her hair and rubbed her mascara to look like she had been crying for hours. Her voice was shaky, a perfect performance of devastated grief. "Hey guys," she whispered to the camera. "I did not want to make this video. I really didn't. But I do not know where else to turn. My grandfather Henry passed away this week. We are heartbroken. But tonight we came home to find that his caregiver, my adopted sister Evelyn, has cleared out his safe." She turned the camera to show the empty metal box. Family heirlooms, his emergency savings, everything he wanted to leave for his grandchildren. Gone. She took advantage of a dying old man. She manipulated him when his mind was going, and she looted his home before we could even plan the funeral. I do not understand how someone could be so evil. Please, if anyone sees Evelyn, tell her to bring Grandpa's things back. We just want justice for Henry. The video ended with her sobbing into her hands. It was a masterpiece of fiction, and the internet ate it up. I watched the comments roll in, refreshing every second. They were vicious. "Find her and make her pay. What a disgusting human being. Adoption was a mistake, clearly bad blood. She belongs in prison. I hope she rots." My direct messages were filling up with death threats. Strangers were finding my business page and leaving 1-star reviews calling me a thief and an elder abuser. My LinkedIn profile was being bombarded. In the span of 20 minutes, Bianca had weaponized millions of strangers against me. She had branded me a criminal to the entire world. My father sent a text message a moment later. "We know what you did. Bring the money tomorrow or we go to the cops. This is your only chance." I put the phone down. My hand was steady. I did not feel fear. I did not feel shame. I felt a cold, hard satisfaction. Because they had made a fatal error. They had assumed the safe was empty because I had stolen from it. They did not know it had been empty for 10 years because my grandfather had spent every penny trying to save the family business they had ruined. More importantly, by posting that video, Bianca had just committed libel per se. She had publicly accused me of a felony with zero proof. She had incited harassment. She had damaged my professional reputation. I walked over to my laptop and opened a new file. I started screen recording everything. I saved the video. I saved the comments. I saved the text messages from my father. I archived the threats. They thought they were destroying me. They thought they were burying me under a mountain of public hatred, so I would crawl to them for mercy. They did not realize they were handing me the ammunition for a lawsuit that would cost them more than the imaginary money they thought was in that safe. I poured myself another glass of water. I watched the view count climb to 100,000. Let them rage. Let them scream. Let them think they had won. Because tomorrow morning I was not just bringing a pen to sign their papers. I was bringing the truth. And the truth was going to hurt them far more than any lie ever could. I turned off my phone, went to my bedroom, and set my alarm for 7 a.m. I needed to be well rested. I had a funeral to attend after all, the funeral of my sister's reputation. The glow of my laptop screen was the only light in my penthouse as I finalized the merger documents for a Fortune 500 client. It was 2 in the morning, but adrenaline kept me awake. This deal was the pinnacle of my career, a masterpiece of negotiation that would secure my reputation as the best crisis manager in Chicago and come with a bonus large enough to buy a small island. I was fixing a disaster for a billion-dollar company, completely unaware that a disaster was about to land in my own inbox. Then the notification pinged. It was not a text from a friend or a late-night email from a colleague. It was a priority alert from my company's Human Resources Legal Compliance Division. My stomach dropped. In my line of work, hearing from compliance at 2 a.m. never meant anything good. I opened the email. Attached was a formal letter on the letterhead of Jamal's law firm. It was marked urgent and addressed to the senior partners of my consultancy. The subject line read, "Formal Notice of Criminal Investigation regarding Evelyn Vance." My hands hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly. I clicked the attachment. "To whom it may concern, the letter," began in Jamal's pompous legal jargon. "Please be advised that Ms. Evelyn Vance is currently the subject of an active investigation regarding the embezzlement of assets from the estate of the late Henry Vance. Furthermore, we are preparing to file charges regarding elder abuse and financial manipulation. Given the sensitive nature of her position at your firm, we felt it was our civic duty to inform you of these pending felony charges to protect your clients from potential liability." It was a lie, a complete fabrication. There was no police investigation. There were no charges filed. It was just a letter from my brother-in-law using his law license as a weapon to destroy my livelihood. He knew exactly what he was doing. In the world of high-stakes crisis management, trust is the only currency that matters. You cannot manage a crisis for a bank if you are accused of robbing one. Even a whisper of financial impropriety is enough to kill a career. Before I could even process the audacity of the lie, my phone rang. It was David, the managing partner of my firm. He never called. He only texted. This was the end. Evelyn. David's voice was tight, devoid of the warmth he usually showed me. "Did you see the email?" "I did, David," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. "You have to know this is false. My grandfather just died. My family is trying to leverage the estate. This is a personal dispute, not a legal reality. There are no charges. It does not matter, Evelyn." David cut me off. "You know the protocol. We represent public companies. We cannot have a lead consultant who is being accused of elder abuse and fraud by a licensed attorney. The liability exposure is too high. David, please," I pleaded, my professionalism cracking for the first time in 10 years. "The merger closes on Friday. If you pull me off now, the deal could collapse. I have worked on this for 6 months. "I am sorry," he said, and I could tell he actually meant it, which somehow made it worse. "I have to put you on administrative leave effective immediately. Your access to the company servers will be revoked in 5 minutes. We will conduct an internal review, but until this legal matter with your family is resolved, you are out. Do not come into the office. Do not contact the client." The line went dead. I stared at the phone. 1 minute later, my laptop screen flickered. A message popped up. "Session expired. Access denied." I tried to log back in. Failed. I tried my email. Failed. My calendar, my contacts, my files. Gone. In the span of 10 minutes, Jamal had stripped me of my career. He had taken the one thing I had built entirely on my own, the one thing that had nothing to do with my family, and he had torched it. I sat in the dark, the silence of the apartment pressing in on me. I had lost the bonus. I had lost the promotion. I had lost my reputation. If this letter got out to other firms, I would never work in this industry again. I was radioactive. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text message from Jamal. Just checking in, the text read, "I hope you are not too busy at work tomorrow morning. It would be a shame if you missed our meeting at the mansion because you were tied up with clients. Oh wait, I forgot. You probably do not have any clients left." I stared at the words. He was gloating. He wanted me to know it was him. He wanted me to know that he could reach into my life and crush it whenever he wanted. He was trying to break me. He wanted me to walk into that meeting tomorrow morning terrified, broken, and desperate for a settlement. He thought that if he took away my income, I would sign his papers just to get $50,000 to survive. He thought he had checkmated me. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. My reflection in the glass looked pale, ghostly. I felt a wave of nausea. The walls were closing in. I had the truth on my side, but truth takes time, and Jamal had just nuked my timeline. But then the panic began to recede, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. Jamal had made a mistake. A massive, arrogant mistake. He had sent that letter on his firm's official letterhead. He had signed it as an officer of the court. He had knowingly made false statements to a third party to cause financial damage. In the legal world, that is called tortious interference with business relations. It is also defamation, and for a lawyer, it is grounds for immediate disbarment. He had gotten sloppy. He was so desperate to protect his wife's lifestyle, so desperate to cover his own debts, that he had exposed himself legally. He thought I was just a helpless girl who happened to be good at business. He forgot that my job was literally managing disasters. He had not just started a family fight. He had started a war. I picked up my phone and dialed Arthur Sterling. It was 3 a.m. I did not care. Arthur picked up on the second ring. "Evelyn, what has happened?" "Add a lawsuit to the pile, Arthur," I said, my voice ice cold. "Jamal just got me fired. He sent a fraudulent legal notice to my firm." There was a silence on the line, followed by the sound of Arthur shifting in bed. "He sent it on his letterhead." "Yes." Arthur let out a low, dark chuckle. "The fool. He just handed us his law license on a silver platter." "I am not just taking his license, Arthur," I said. "I am taking everything." I looked at the blank screen of my work laptop. I was cornered. I was unemployed. I was under siege. But I was not defeated. I went to my personal safe in the closet. I spun the dial and opened the heavy door. I bypassed the stack of cash and reached for the back. I pulled out a black hard drive. This was my backup, my insurance. Jamal thought he had cut off my resources. He did not know that I had been preparing for a hostile takeover my entire life. I sat back down at my desk. I pulled up the file marked Omega Protocol. They wanted a villain. They wanted to paint me as the bad guy who stole their inheritance. Fine. If they wanted a villain, I would show them what a real villain looked like. I typed a reply to Jamal's text. "See you at 9, I wrote. Don't be late." I set the phone down. I did not sleep. I spent the rest of the night printing documents, every email, every bank statement, and now the letter he had sent to my boss. By the time the sun came up over Chicago, I was ready. They thought they were walking into a victory lap. They had no idea they were walking into an execution. The phone rang again at 4 a.m. It was not a text this time. It was a call. The caller ID flashed unknown number, but I knew who it was. I had been waiting for this. I picked up on the third ring but said nothing. I just listened to the silence, the static, and then the sound of ice clinking in a glass. "Well, well, well," Bianca's voice slurred, slightly thick with victory and expensive vodka. "If it isn't the woman of the hour. Or should I say the unemployed woman of the hour?" I sat in the darkness of my penthouse living room, the city lights reflecting off the floor-to-ceiling windows like distant stars. I put the phone on speaker and set it on the marble table next to my laptop. The screen glowed blue, illuminating the complex web of financial data I had spent the last 5 years building. "What do you want, Bianca?" I asked, keeping my voice flat, tired, giving her exactly what she wanted to hear. "I just wanted to hear your voice," she laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. "I wanted to hear what defeat sounds like. Did you get the email from your boss? Jamal told me he sent it. It was a masterpiece, do not you think? Criminal investigation. Elder abuse. It really paints a picture." "It is slander, Bianca," I said, "and it is going to get your husband disbarred." "Oh, please," she scoffed. "You think you can sue us? With what money? You are jobless, Evelyn. You are homeless. We have the mansion, we have the lawyers, we have the narrative. By tomorrow morning, everyone in Chicago will know you are a thief. Who is going to hire you then? Who is going to believe you?" She paused to take a drink. I could hear her swallow. "Here is the deal, sis," she continued, her tone dropping to a mock whisper. "Because I am generous. Because I am the bigger person. You come to the meeting at 9. You sign the waiver. You admit that you misplaced the funds in the safe. You give us whatever cash you have squirreled away, and in exchange, Jamal will make a call. He will tell your boss it was a misunderstanding. He will drop the investigation. We will even let you keep your car. You can sleep in it until you find a shelter." I looked at the screen in front of me. The file labeled Omega Protocol was open. It was a detailed map of every debt, every lien, every leveraged asset my grandfather had created to save the family from ruin. It showed the $18 million mortgage on the mansion. It showed the $3 million loan against the car collection. It showed the farmland was collateral for a failed tech startup my father had insisted on funding. And right next to it, in a separate encrypted window, was the trust fund my grandfather had set up for me. The one holding the intellectual property rights to the cancer drug. The one generating $15 million a year in royalties. The one they knew nothing about. They thought they were holding a royal flush. They did not know they were playing with monopoly money. "That is a very generous offer, Bianca," I said, allowing a tremor of fear to enter my voice. "Isn't it?" she purred. "I am saving your life, Evelyn. You should be thanking me. You see, this is what happens when you try to play in the big leagues without the bloodline. You get crushed. You were never one of us. You were just a temporary fix. And now, you are expired." I closed my eyes for a second, letting the hate wash over me. It was fuel. It was energy. "I will be there at 9, I said. "Good girl," she said. "Wear something nice. I want you to look presentable when you sign your life away. Oh, and Evelyn, do not be late. We have a champagne brunch scheduled for 11 to celebrate. We would not want to keep the real family waiting." The line clicked dead. I sat in the silence for a long moment. Then I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the sprawling city. Somewhere out there in that dark mansion my family was toasting to my destruction. They were laughing. They were planning their renovations. They were spending money that did not exist. I turned back to my laptop. I typed a single command into the terminal. Execute. The screen flashed green. The Omega protocol was active. I picked up my tea, now cold, and took a sip. "Laugh while you can, Bianca," I whispered to the empty room. "Because tomorrow you are going to find out exactly what it costs to be family." I went to my closet. I pushed aside the sensible gray suits I wore to work. I reached for the back where I kept the clothes I bought with my own money, the money they did not know I had. I pulled out a white suit, sharp, pristine, powerful. It was the color of a clean slate. It was the color of a funeral shroud. I laid it out on the bed. I checked my watch. 4:30 a.m., 4.5 hours until showtime. I did not go back to sleep. I went to the kitchen and started making breakfast. Eggs, toast, coffee. I needed my strength. I had a lot of work to do. At 8 a.m., Arthur arrived at my building. He buzzed up. I let him in. He looked tired, but his eyes were bright with anticipation. He was carrying the red and black briefcases. "Ready?" he asked. I picked up my purse. I looked around my penthouse, my sanctuary, the home I had built from the ashes of their rejection. "I am ready," I said. We took the elevator down to the garage. My car was waiting. Not the sensible sedan they thought I drove, but the matte black Audi R8 I had bought with my first royalty check. We drove out into the morning sun. The city was waking up. People were going to work. Life was moving on. But for my family, time was about to stop. We pulled up to the mansion gates at 8:55. They were open just as Bianca had promised. I drove up the long driveway, the gravel crunching under my tires. I parked next to their leased luxury cars. I stepped out. The air was crisp. The house looked imposing, a monument to old money and hidden debts. I adjusted my jacket. I looked at Arthur. He nodded. "Let's go foreclose on some memories," I said. And we walked up the steps to the front door, not as victims, but as the new owners. The sunlight streaming through the tall windows should have made the room feel warm, but the atmosphere inside the dining hall was glacial. I walked toward the table, the heels of my white shoes clicking rhythmically on the parquet floor, a sound that seemed to annoy my sister instantly. They were already seated, arrayed like a royal court holding a tribunal. My father, Richard, sat at the head of the table in a high-backed velvet chair, wearing a silk smoking jacket that I recognized as grandfather's. It hung loosely on him, a costume of authority he hadn't earned. To his right sat my mother Susan, nursing a cup of coffee and looking at me with a mixture of pity and disdain. On the left were Bianca and Jamal, flanked by their row of suits, Jamal's legal team, who looked bored, checking their watches and scrolling on their phones. At the far end of the table facing them, they had placed a single wooden folding chair. It was the kind we kept in the basement for extra catering staff. A petty, calculated visual insult designed to make me feel small, to physically lower me beneath their eye line. I didn't break stride. I walked past the folding chair, ignored it completely, and pulled out one of the heavy antique dining chairs from the side wall. I dragged it over the legs, scraping loudly against the floor, and placed it directly across from my father. Bianca rolled her eyes, crumbling a croissant onto a china plate. "You're late, Evelyn. We said 9 sharp. Do you not own a watch? Or did you have to pawn it to pay for gas?" "It is 9 o'clock exactly," I said, sitting down and smoothing the lapel of my white suit. "Your clock is fast." "We don't have time for your attitude," my father snapped, not even looking up from the tablet he was scrolling through. "Let's get this over with. I have a very busy schedule today." "Busy spending money you don't have?" I asked lightly. He slammed the tablet down. "Busy managing my estate. I have a meeting with the luxury real estate broker at 10:30. We're listing the property. I have cash buyers lined up who are flying in from Dubai this afternoon. So sign the papers, take your little charity check, and get out of my house. We need to stage the room." "The broker," I repeated, letting a small cold smile touch my lips. "You're selling the house today." "We are liquidating," my mother chimed in, her voice shrill and haughty. "It's called portfolio diversification, darling. You wouldn't understand high-level finance. We're moving assets into more modern investments, crypto, metaverse real estate." "And paying off my credit cards," Bianca muttered, taking a sip of mimosa. "So hurry up. I have a shopping cart online that's about to expire." Jamal slid a thick document across the polished mahogany table. It stopped inches from my hand. It was flagged with yellow sticky notes, aggressive little arrows pointing to signature lines. "Here is the deal," Jamal said, leaning back and tenting his fingers, trying to look like a managing partner instead of a man who chased ambulances for a living. "This is a full waiver of claims against the estate. It also includes a non-disclosure agreement regarding family matters and a confession of judgment regarding the items missing from the wall safe. You sign this admitting you took the valuables, and we agree not to press criminal charges. In exchange, we will cut you a check for $50,000. It is a settlement. It is mercy. Take it." I looked down at the paperwork. It was garbage. Legally flimsy, morally bankrupt garbage. They wanted me to confess to a crime I didn't commit so they could hold it over my head forever. "You really think I stole from the safe?" I said softly. "We know you did," Bianca spat. "It was empty. Who else knew the combination? Just you and Grandpa. You looted him blind while he was dying. And now you want me to sign a confession so you can sell the house and buy Ferraris," I said. "We don't want you to do anything," my father sneered. "We are telling you to do it. You have no leverage, Evelyn. You are a nobody. You have no job, no home, and as of last night, no reputation. If you don't sign that paper in the next 5 minutes, I will have security throw you out, and then I will call the district attorney myself. I will make sure you rot in a cell." He looked at me with such intense entitlement, a man who had failed at every business venture he ever touched, now puffing his chest out because he won the genetic lottery. He truly believed he was the king of this castle. I didn't pick up the pen. Instead, I reached down to the floor where Arthur had placed his briefcase. "You know," I said, my voice calm, conversational. "Grandpa Henry used to tell me stories about you, Dad. He said the problem wasn't that you were bad at business, it was that you never read the fine print." "Shut up about Henry," my father roared, his face turning a blotchy red. "He was senile. He didn't know what he was saying. Sign the damn paper." "Or what?" I asked. "Or you leave with nothing," Bianca screamed. "Nothing. You go back to being the poor little orphan nobody wanted." I smiled. It was the smile of someone who had already seen the end of the movie. "I don't think I will sign," I said. "But I did bring something for you to read." I unlatched the black briefcase. The sound was sharp like a bone snapping. I pulled out a single bound document with a red cover. Gold letters embossed on the front read, "Consolidated Debt and Audit Report, Henry Vance Estate." I slid it across the table. It spun slowly, passing the waiver they wanted me to sign, and stopped right in front of my father. "What is this?" he demanded, staring at it with suspicion. "That," I said, leaning back and crossing my legs, "is the reason you should have checked the public records before you ordered that champagne. Open it." "I don't have to listen to this," he blustered, but his hand twitched. Curiosity and greed were a potent mix. "Open it, Richard," Arthur said, his voice deep and gravelly from beside me. "Unless you want to explain to the broker why you're trying to sell a house you don't actually own." The room went deadly silent. My father's hand trembled as he reached for the cover. He flipped it open. He read the first line, then the second. I watched the color drain from his face drop by drop until he looked like a ghost in a silk robe. "This," he whispered, his voice cracking. "This isn't right." "Read page 4, I suggested helpfully. "The section on liens and encumbrances." He flipped the pages frantically, tearing one in his haste. As his eyes scanned the numbers, he slumped back in his chair, the report slipping from his fingers. "What?" my mother demanded, panic rising in her voice. "Richard, what is it? Is it more money? Did he hide the money?" "It's not money, Susan," I said, my eyes locking onto hers. "It's the opposite." And for the first time that morning, the arrogance in the room began to curdle into fear. "What does it mean?" Susan asked, her voice trembling, as she leaned over my father's shoulder to look at the red file, her eyes darting across the columns of numbers she did not understand. "Richard, say something. Why are you shaking?" My father looked up at me, and for the first time in my life I saw true fear in his eyes. Not the fear of embarrassment or social slight, but the primal fear of a man watching his life raft burn. "This says the estate is insolvent," he whispered, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "Insolvent," Jamal barked, laughing nervously. "That is impossible. We are sitting in a $20 million mansion. We have a garage full of vintage cars. We have hundreds of acres of prime farmland. How can it be insolvent?" "Because you are looking at the assets, Jamal, but you forgot to look at the liabilities," I said, my voice cutting through the panic like a scalpel. "You see, Grandfather Henry was a gambler. But unlike you, Richard, he did not gamble on crypto or vanity projects. He gambled on science." I stood up and walked around the table, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor, pacing like a predator circling wounded prey. 10 years ago, when you came to him begging for money to cover your embezzlement charges, Henry did not have $15 million in cash lying around, I explained. He was asset-rich, but cash-poor. So to save you from prison, he did the only thing he could do. He leveraged everything. I pointed to the document in my father's shaking hands. "Turn to page 7, Dad. Look at the entry for the Shelby GT 500. My father flipped the page, his finger tracing the line. "Bianca, you wanted to sell the car to pay your credit cards," I said, turning to my sister, who was clutching her mimosa like a lifeline. "You cannot. The car does not belong to the estate. It belongs to First National Bank. Henry took out a title loan against the entire collection to fund the initial lab equipment. The loan is structured as interest-only payments for 10 years. The principal is due upon death." Bianca dropped her glass. It shattered on the floor, spraying orange juice and champagne over her white designer shoes. "That cannot be true," she shrieked. "I already promised it to the buyer." "Then you better learn how to refund a wire transfer," I said coldly. "And Mom, you wanted to sell the farmland for your metaverse investment. Look at page 12. Susan grabbed the folder, tearing the paper in her desperation. Her eyes scanned the page, and she let out a small, strangled sob. Cross-collateralized, she read the words foreign on her tongue, but the meaning clear enough. Exactly, I said. The farm is collateral for the mansion mortgage, and the mansion mortgage is collateral for the research grants. It is a house of cards, Mom. And the wind just blew. Jamal snatched the folder from Susan. He was sweating now, the confident lawyer facade melting away to reveal the terrified fraud underneath. He flipped to the summary page. He ran his finger down the column of red ink. $18 million, he whispered. The number hung in the air, sucking the oxygen out of the room. $18 million in debt, I confirmed. The house you are sitting in is not an asset, it is a liability. It is what we call in the industry an underwater asset. The market value is maybe $12 million if you are lucky. The debt against it is $15 million. The cars are underwater, the land is underwater. Henry bet the farm literally on his research. But we can just walk away? My father stammered. We can just sell it and pay off what we can. I laughed a low, humorless sound. You really are a terrible businessman, Richard. You cannot just sell it. Because of the way Henry structured the loans. Look at the date on the bottom of page 1. Jamal looked. His eyes bulged. The maturation date, he choked out. It is today. Today, I repeated. Henry timed the loans to mature exactly 10 years from the date he bailed you out. He figured in 10 years you would either have built your own fortune or you would have learned your lesson. The interest rate on that $18 million debt was fixed at 3% for a decade. But as of this morning, since the principal was not paid in full, the rate converts to a variable commercial rate. I leaned in close to Jamal. Do you know what the current variable rate for distressed commercial debt is, Jamal? He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. 12%, he whispered. 14, I corrected. Plus penalties. That means as of 9 a.m. this morning, this estate is accruing interest at a rate of roughly $7,000 a day. And here is the best part. I paused, letting them suffer, letting the reality sink into their pores. Probate law. When you filed that emergency petition this morning to be named executors, when you rushed to claim next of kin status to lock me out, you accepted fiduciary responsibility for the estate. You did not just inherit the house. You inherited the debt. No, Bianca screamed. No, that is not fair. We did not sign the loans. You accepted the asset, I said. You moved in. You changed the locks. You acted as owners. By claiming ownership of the mansion, you claimed ownership of the mortgage. You are on the hook. Jamal threw the file onto the table as if it were burning his hands. We reject it, he yelled. We renounce the inheritance. We do not want it. Too late, I said, checking my watch. You already live-streamed your occupancy. You already contacted brokers to sell assets you do not own. You have exercised dominion over the estate. The bank knows. I sent them the video of Bianca in the study this morning. They know you are here. They know you are claiming to be the heirs. And they are very excited to meet you. My mother began to hyperventilate. We are ruined, she gasped, clutching her pearls. We will lose everything. Our condo. Your pension, Richard. They will come for everything. They will, I agreed cheerfully. That is how secured debt works when the collateral is insufficient. They come for the guarantors. And since Henry is dead, the debt passes to the estate. And since you are the estate, well, you can do the math. I walked over to the window and looked out at the beautiful sprawling grounds. It is a tragedy, really. Henry spent every dime he had trying to cure cancer. He mortgaged his legacy to save lives. And you were so busy waiting for him to die, so you could spend his money, that you never bothered to ask him what he was doing with it. You just assumed he was hoarding it for you. You knew, my father roared, standing up, his face purple with rage. You knew this whole time. You let us walk into a trap. I did not let you do anything, I said, turning back to face them. I tried to tell you. Yesterday at my office, I tried to warn you. I told you I would settle it. But you kicked down my door. You called me bloodless. You threatened to sue me. You wanted the estate so badly, Richard. Well, congratulations, you got it. You got every single cent of debt your father accumulated to clean up your messes. Bianca was sobbing now, mascara running down her cheeks in black streaks. I cannot be poor, she wailed. I have a reputation. I have followers. They think I am rich. You can live stream your bankruptcy hearing, I suggested. I bet that will get a lot of views. Jamal was frantically typing on his phone, probably trying to transfer assets offshore or find a legal loophole, but his hands were shaking so badly he kept hitting the wrong keys. It is ironclad, Jamal, I said softly. Arthur drafted the loan documents himself. There is no way out. Unless you can write a check for $18 million by 5 p.m. today, the bank initiates foreclosure proceedings, and they will seize personal assets to cover the deficiency. That means your firm, Jamal. That means your retirement, Mom. That means your shoe collection, Bianca. My mother looked at me with eyes full of hatred and despair. Why are you doing this? She hissed. Why do you hate us so much? I do not hate you, I said. I am just giving you what you asked for. You wanted the bloodline to inherit. You wanted the family to keep the estate. Well, here it is. The estate is yours. The debt is yours. The legacy is yours. But wait, Jamal said, his eyes snapping up from his phone, a glimmer of desperate hope appearing. You said he invested in research. You said he spent the money on science. Where is the research? If he spent $18 million, there has to be something to show for it. A product, a patent, something we can sell. The room went silent again. My father looked up, hope warring with his fear. Yes, he said, breathless. The research. If he cured cancer, that has to be worth billions. We own the estate, so we own the research. We can sell the patent. We can pay off the debt and still be rich. I smiled. It was the smile of the executioner pulling the lever. You are right, I said. The research was successful. In fact, it was wildly successful. The drug is currently the standard of care for pancreatic cancer in 20 countries. Then we are saved, Bianca cried, jumping up. We are saved. We sell the drug. There is just one problem, I said, reaching for the second briefcase, the red one. What problem? My father demanded, reaching for the champagne bottle again, his hands trembling with renewed greed. The problem, I said, unlatching the case, is that Henry did not own the research. Not when he died. I pulled out the document with the gold seal. He knew you would do this, I said. He knew you would sell his life's work to the highest bidder to buy sports cars and handbags. So 5 years ago, on the night you kicked me out into the snow, he made a transfer. Transfer to who? Jamal whispered, the color draining from his face again. To a blind trust, I said. A trust that holds all intellectual property rights, all patents, all royalties. And who is the beneficiary? My mother asked, her voice barely a squeak. I placed the document on the table. It sat there glowing in the morning light. I am. The silence that followed my revelation was not peaceful. It was the breathless vacuum before an explosion, and then the room erupted into chaos as the reality of their situation fractured their united front. Bianca was the first to snap, her face twisting from shock into ugly raw fury as she turned on our parents, screaming that they had told her grandpa was loaded. She shrieked that she had maxed out 3 credit cards yesterday based on their promises, and demanded to know how they could be so stupid to not know their own father was broke. My mother, Susan, did not even look at her daughter. Instead, she whirled on Jamal, her face flushed with panic and rage, pointing a manicured finger at his chest. She yelled that he was supposed to be a lawyer and asked why he had not checked the title search or the lien history before they moved in. She screamed that he was useless and incompetent and asked what kind of real estate attorney moves his wife into a foreclosed home. Jamal stood up, knocking his chair over, his voice rising an octave as he shouted back that he had trusted Richard's word because he assumed a grown man knew the state of his own inheritance. He yelled that he was not a probate lawyer and that he had only filed the emergency petition because Bianca would not stop nagging him about the master bedroom. Richard sat in the middle of the storm holding his head in his hands, muttering that he thought the loans were forgiven, that he thought Henry had taken care of it. You thought Bianca screamed, picking up a crystal vase and hurling it at the wall where it shattered into 1,000 glittering shards. You thought wrong, Dad. You are a failure. You failed at business, you failed at life, and now you have failed to leave me anything but debt. I hate you. I hate all of you. It was a feeding frenzy. They were eating each other alive. The perfect family facade had dissolved instantly, revealing the rot underneath. I watched them sipping my tea, feeling a cold detachment. This was the family that had looked down on me my entire life. This was the bloodline they were so proud of. Suddenly, the screaming stopped. It did not fade away. It cut off abruptly, as if a collective thought had struck them all at once. 4 pairs of desperate, predatory eyes turned toward me. They looked at the red folder under my hand, the folder containing the intellectual property rights worth $200 million. Then they looked at the black folder containing the $18 million debt. My father stood up. He smoothed his silk robe, trying to regain the composure of the patriarch. He cleared his throat and put on a smile that was terrifying in its falseness. "Evelyn, honey," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "let us not be hasty. We are all emotional. We are grieving. But we need to think about what Henry would have wanted." "And what would he have wanted, Richard?" I asked calmly. "He would have wanted the house to stay in the family," my father said, stepping closer. "He built this place. It is his legacy. We cannot let the bank take it. It would break his heart." Susan nodded, wiping her tears instantly. "Exactly. We have to save the mansion. For Henry. And since you were so close to him, since you loved him so much, it is only right that you take on that responsibility." I raised an eyebrow. "You want me to take the house?" "Yes," Jamal said, eagerly jumping in. "We are willing to step aside. We will withdraw our petition. We will sign whatever you want. You can be the sole heir. You can take the house, the cars, the land. All of it. And the debt," I asked. "Well, the debt goes with the assets," Jamal said, talking fast. "That is just how it works. But you have the patent. You have the royalties. You can pay off the $18 million easily. It is a drop in the bucket for you. You pay the debt, you keep the house, everyone wins." Bianca looked at me, her eyes narrowing. She hated the idea of me having the house, but she hated the idea of being bankrupt more. "Fine," she spat. "You can have it. You always wanted to be the lady of the manor anyway. Take the house. Take the debt. Just give us a cash settlement for stepping aside. Say $5 million. For our pain and suffering." I laughed. It was a loud, genuine laugh that echoed off the high ceilings. "Let me get this straight," I said, standing up. "You want me to use my money to pay off your $18 million debt, and then you want me to pay you $5 million for the privilege of saving you from bankruptcy." "It is a fair deal," my father insisted. "You get the family home. You get to be a Vance." I looked at them one last time. I looked at the greed still flickering in their eyes even as the ship went down. They still thought they could manipulate me. They still thought I craved their acceptance so much that I would pay $23 million just to be called their daughter. They were wrong. I picked up the red folder with the patent rights. I tucked it under my arm. I left the black folder with the debt on the table. "No," I said. "What do you mean, no?" my mother gasped. "I mean no," I said, walking toward the door. "I do not want the house. It has termites in the basement and the roof leaks. But more importantly, I do not want to be a Vance." "But you have to take it," Jamal shouted, panic rising in his voice again. "You lived here. You have constructive ownership." I stopped at the door. I turned back to them. "Yesterday I was a tenant," I said. "Yesterday I was the help. Yesterday Bianca called me bloodless. You made it very clear that I am not part of this family. You said this inheritance belongs to the bloodline. You said I was an outsider. I pointed at the black folder. Well, you were right. I am an outsider. And that debt belongs to the estate. Since you claimed the estate this morning, since you filed that petition and moved in, that debt belongs to you. It is your inheritance. Enjoy it. Evelyn. Wait! My father screamed, lunging for me. You cannot leave us with this. I am not leaving you with anything, Richard. I said, opening the front door to the bright morning sun. I am leaving you with exactly what you earned. I walked out. I did not run. I walked. I heard them screaming my name. I heard Bianca wailing. But I did not look back. I got into my car and drove through the open gates, leaving them trapped in the gilded cage they had fought so hard to steal. But wait, Jamal said, his voice cracking as he looked up from his phone, his eyes darting between the black folder of debt and my face. You said he leveraged everything. You said he bet the farm on science. He stood up slowly, his mind finally working through the fog of panic. If he spent $18 million on research, there has to be something to show for it, right? You do not spend that kind of money and get nothing. Where is the work? Where is the result? My father Richard looked up, hope warring with the terror in his eyes. He wiped his sweaty palms on his silk robe. Jamal is right, he stammered. Henry was not a fool. He was a visionary. If he mortgaged the estate, he must have been close to a breakthrough. Is there a patent? Is there a formula? Susan grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. Evelyn, tell us. Did he cure it? Did he cure the cancer? I looked at them. I looked at the desperation etched into their faces. They were like drowning sailors spotting a flare on the horizon. They did not care about the science. They did not care about the lives my grandfather wanted to save. They only cared if the science could pay off their credit cards. They only cared if the cure could cure their bankruptcy. I decided to give them one last taste of hope, one last moment of euphoria before the final drop. Yes, I said quietly. He did. The room went dead silent. You could hear the rain tapping against the window pane, a soft rhythm against the sudden stillness. What did you say? Bianca whispered. He did it, I said, my voice steady and clear. The research was a complete success. The clinical trials finished 2 years ago. The FDA fast-tracked approval because the results were unprecedented. The drug is called Vanstrax. It is currently the standard of care for stage 4 pancreatic cancer in 20 different countries. It is saving thousands of lives every month. My father let out a long, shuddering breath. He fell back into his chair, laughing hysterically, tears streaming down his face. I knew it. He gasped. I knew the old man was a genius. We are saved. Do you hear me, Susan? We are saved. Susan was sobbing with relief, clutching her chest. Oh, thank God. Thank God. We can sell the patent. We can license the drug. Jamal was already calculating furiously on his phone, his thumbs flying across the screen. Pharmaceutical patents for oncology drugs valuation, he muttered to himself. If it is standard of care, we are talking billions. Literally billions. We can pay off the $18 million debt tomorrow. We can buy the island. We can buy the jet. Bianca jumped up and grabbed my shoulders, shaking me. Why did you not start with that, you idiot? She screamed, but she was smiling a wild, manic grin. You scared us half to death. We are rich. We are richer than we ever were. The debt does not matter. The house does not matter. We own the cure for cancer. They were celebrating. They were hugging each other. My father poured more champagne, his hands shaking with excitement instead of fear. They were already spending the money in their heads. They were already back to their arrogant, dismissive selves. Jamal turned to me, beaming. Okay, Evelyn, you had your fun. You scared us. Good joke. Now hand over the research files. We need to contact a broker. We need to get the valuation started. I did not move. I just stood there watching them. You seem to be confused, Jamal, I said. Confused about what? He laughed. We are the heirs. We own the estate. You just said the estate owns the debt, but it also owns the assets. That includes the research. That is how probate works. You are right, I said. That is how probate works. If the assets are part of the estate. The laughter died. The champagne glasses stopped halfway to their mouths. What are you saying? My father asked, his voice dropping. I turned to Arthur. He was standing by the window watching the rain. He turned and picked up the second briefcase, the red one. He set it on the table. The sound of the latches clicking open was like a gunshot in the quiet room. Open it, Richard, Arthur said. My father reached out. His hand was trembling again. He lifted the lid. Inside was a single document bound in blue leather with a gold seal. It is a deed of trust, my father whispered, reading the cover. The Henry Vance Blind Trust. Keep reading, I said. Look at the schedule of assets. He flipped the page. He read the list. His face went from pale to gray. Intellectual property assignment, he read, his voice barely audible. All patents, all royalties, all licensing agreements related to Vance tracks. Transferred. He stopped. He looked up at me. Transferred when Jamal demanded, grabbing the document. 5 years ago, I said. 5 years ago, Bianca repeated. But why? Do you remember that night, Mom? I asked, looking at Susan. It was a Tuesday. It was snowing. I had just received my first bonus from the crisis management firm. $10,000. I was so proud. I came here to tell you. Susan stared at me blankly. You told me you needed the money, I continued. You said you needed it for repairs on the summer house. I told you I needed it for my student loans. You got angry. You said if I was going to be selfish, I could not live under your roof. I remember my father whispered. You told me to get out, I said. You changed the locks. You threw my coat into the snow. It was 10 degrees below zero. I sat in my car at the end of the driveway for 3 hours, waiting for you to change your minds. You never came out. Bianca rolled her eyes. Oh my God, get over it. You survived. Yes, I survived, I said. Because Grandpa Henry came out. He saw me from his window. He put on his coat, and he walked down the driveway in the snow. He tapped on my window. He told me to drive him to Arthur's office. At midnight, Arthur added. He woke me up. He was furious. He said he had finally seen the truth. What truth? My mother asked. That you were wolves, I said. That you would eat him alive the moment he showed weakness. And that you would eat me too, if he did not give me armor. I walked over to the table and tapped the blue document. That night, Grandpa Henry signed this. He transferred the ownership of every single piece of intellectual property, every formula, every patent, every future royalty stream into this trust. He removed it from his personal estate completely. But that is illegal? Jamal stammered. That is hiding assets. It is perfectly legal, Arthur corrected him. It was his property. He was of sound mind. He made an irrevocable transfer inter vivos, while he was alive. It is not part of the probate estate. It is not subject to his debts, and it is certainly not subject to your inheritance. So the estate owns nothing, my father choked out. The estate owns the debt, I said. The estate owns the underwater house and the mortgaged cars. And who owns the trust? Bianca asked, her voice shrill. Who owns the drug? I reached into the briefcase and pulled out the beneficiary statement. I held it up. I do, I said. The silence this time was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. You, my mother whispered. Me, I said. Grandpa Henry made me the sole beneficiary. He said I was the only one who cared about the work, not the reward. He said I was the only one who drove him to chemo, not to the bank. How much? Jamal asked. His voice was a dry croak. I looked at the valuation page. Vance Tracks generated $15 million in royalties last year, I said. The projected earnings for next year are $20 million. The current valuation of the patent portfolio is $200 million. $200 million. My father made a sound like he had been punched in the gut. He slumped forward, resting his forehead on the table. $200 million, Susan moaned, rocking back and forth. It was right here. It was right under our noses. And it is completely separate from the $18 million debt I added just to twist the knife. The trust is a separate legal entity. The bank cannot touch it. The creditors cannot touch it. And you definitely cannot touch it. No, Bianca screamed, lunging across the table. No, that is not fair. You are not even blood. You are adopted. You cannot have the family fortune. It belongs to us. It belonged to Henry, I said, stepping back out of her reach. And he chose his family. He chose the person who held his hand while he died, not the people who were drinking margaritas in Cabo. Jamal dropped into a chair. He looked broken. So we have nothing, he said. We have worse than nothing. We have $18 million in debt that is accruing interest by the second. And you have $200 million free and clear. That is the math, I said. My mother looked up at me. Her eyes were wet, but not with sadness, with calculation. Evelyn, she said, her voice taking on a wheedling, pathetic tone. Evelyn, honey, you are rich. You are filthy rich. You can pay the debt. 15 million is nothing to you. You can write a check right now. You can save the house. You can save us. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had told me I was a bad investment, who had told me I was just a nurse she did not have to pay. Why would I do that, I asked. Because we are family, she cried. Because we raised you. Because we are your parents. You were my parents when it was convenient, I said. When I was an accessory for your holiday photos. But when I needed help, when I needed love, you told me I was a tenant. You told me I was bloodless. I picked up the red briefcase. I snapped it shut. You wanted the estate, Mom. You fought for it. You kicked down my office door for it. Well, you got it. You got the house. You got the cars. You got the legacy. But you cannot leave us like this, my father begged, tears streaming down his cheeks. The bank will take everything. They will take my pension. They will take the condo. We will be on the street. I walked to the door. I put my hand on the brass handle. I remember what that feels like, I said. I remember sitting in a car in the snow wondering where I was going to sleep. I remember you watching from the window and turning off the lights. Evelyn, please, Bianca wailed. I cannot be poor. I do not know how to be poor. You will learn, I said. It is amazing what you can learn when you have no other choice. I opened the door. The fresh air rushed in, chasing away the smell of stale champagne and desperation. The bank representatives will be here in 45 minutes, I said, checking my watch. They are coming to change the locks. Just like you changed them on me, I suggest you grab what you can carry. I walked out onto the porch. The rain had stopped. The sun was shining on the wet pavement. Wait, Jamal shouted, running after me. Wait, Evelyn. We can make a deal. I can help you. I can manage the trust. I am a lawyer. I stopped and looked at him. You are a lawyer who just moved his wife into a foreclosed home, I said. I think I will stick with Arthur. I walked down the steps to my car. I got in. I started the engine. I looked back at the house one last time. I saw them standing in the doorway, a huddled mass of grief and greed. They looked small. They looked pathetic. And for the first time in my life, they did not look scary. I put the car in gear and drove away. I had a meeting with the patent office at noon, and then I had a meeting with the architect. I was thinking of buying a new house, something modern, something glass, something with no basement full of secrets and no wall safe full of lies. I was the bloodless heiress, and I had never felt more alive. The silence in the room shifted. It was no longer the silence of shock. It was the silence of calculation. I watched the gears turning behind my mother's teary eyes. She looked at the red folder in my hand, the one representing $200 million, And then she looked at the black folder on the table, the one representing $18 million of debt. The math was simple. I had enough money to solve their problem 10 times over. I could write a check for the mortgage right now and not even notice it was gone from my account. I was their lifeboat. I was their only way out of the freezing water. And just like that, the woman who had screamed at me from the balcony yesterday, the woman who had thrown my clothes into the mud, vanished. In her place stood a trembling, fragile old woman who looked at me with eyes full of desperate, manufactured love. Evelyn. Susan breathed, her voice cracking perfectly. My sweet, smart Evelyn. She took a step toward me, then another. She moved faster than I thought possible in her heels, rushing across the Persian rug until she was right in front of me. I did not move. I just watched her. She reached out and grabbed my hands. Her palms were clammy. Baby, she said, squeezing my fingers. We have been so foolish. We let grief cloud our judgment. Losing Henry, it broke us all. We said things we did not mean. We were scared. But looking at you now standing there so strong, so successful, I realize how wrong we were. She dropped to her knees. It was a theatrical, humiliating gesture. My mother, the socialite who prided herself on never showing weakness, was kneeling on the floor in her designer dress, clutching the hem of my white trousers like a beggar. Please, Evelyn, she sobbed, looking up at me. We are family. We are your people. You cannot let them take our home. You cannot let your father go bankrupt at his age. He has a heart condition. The stress will kill him. My father Richard, seeing his wife on the floor, decided to join the performance. He did not kneel. His pride would not allow it, but he slumped his shoulders and put on the face of a defeated, weary patriarch. She is right, Evelyn, he said, his voice gruff with fake emotion. We raised you. We put a roof over your head. We fed you. We clothed you. Does that count for nothing? Yes, we had our differences. Yes, we were tough on you. But it was because we wanted you to be tough. We wanted you to be ready for the world. And look at you. You are a multi-millionaire. We did our job. Now we need you to do yours. Do my job, I repeated, my voice flat. Your duty. Susan cried, pulling on my pants leg. Your duty as a daughter. Use the royalty money. Pay off the mortgage. It is pocket change to you. We can be a real family again. We will give you your old room back. We will redecorate it however you want. You can live here with us. We will fire the staff. You can run the house. Just please write the check. I looked down at her. I looked at the woman who had told her friends I was a hired nurse. I looked at the woman who had watched me sleep in my car in the snow and turned off the porch light. I gently but firmly pulled my leg away from her grasp. I took a step back, creating a physical distance that matched the emotional chasm between us. Get up, Susan, I said. You are embarrassing yourself. She scrambled to her feet, her face blotchy, her eyes wide and manic. I am begging you, she wailed. We are family. Family, I said, tasting the word. It felt sour. That is a funny word. I seem to remember you using a different word yesterday. And this morning. I looked at Bianca. She was sitting in her chair, frozen, watching us with terrified eyes. What was it you called me, Bianca? I asked. Oh, that is right. Bloodless. You said I was the bloodless sister. You said the estate belonged to the bloodline. I turned back to my mother. And you, Susan, you told the guests at the funeral that I was just the help. You said I was a nurse you hired to change Grandpa's diapers so you did not have to. You said I was a tenant. I tapped the red folder against my palm. Well, you were right. I am not blood. I am not family. I am a stranger. And this money, this is stranger money. It is bloodless money. And last time I checked, strangers do not pay $18 million debts for people who evict them in the rain. But we love you, Susan screamed, reaching for me again. No, I said, sidestepping her. You love this folder. You love the lifestyle this folder can buy. You do not even know me. You do not know my favorite color. You do not know how I take my coffee. You do not know the name of my company. You only know that I have the one thing you need, and you will say anything, do anything, be anything to get it. It is cruel, my father barked, his face turning red again, as the begging strategy failed. It is cruel to hold this over us, to dangle salvation and then snatch it away. It is vindictive. It is not vindictive, Richard Weiss said. It is business. You taught me that. You always said business comes first. Well, paying off your bad debt is a terrible business decision. The asset is depreciating, the leverage is toxic, and the management team. I looked at the three of them. The management team is incompetent. Jamal, who had been silent, finally spoke up. His voice was low, devoid of hope. She is not going to pay it, Susan. Stop begging. She hates us. I looked at Jamal. He was the only one who actually understood the finality of what was happening. I do not hate you, Jamal, I said. Hate takes energy. I just do not care. I am indifferent. And that is what is going to kill you. You are not worth my hate. And you are certainly not worth my $15 million. Bianca let out a low moan. She looked at her husband. Do something, she hissed. You are a lawyer. Sue her. Take the trust. I cannot, Jamal said, burying his face in his hands. It is a blind trust. It is irrevocable. It is ironclad. She owns it all. We have nothing. My mother stopped crying abruptly. The mask fell away completely. The loving mother vanished, replaced by the vicious, cornered animal she really was. You ungrateful witch, she spat, her eyes narrowing into slits. We took you in. We saved you from the orphanage. We should have left you there. We should have left you to rot. There it is, I said, smiling. There is the truth. Thank you, Susan. I was waiting for that. I checked my watch. It is 10:45, I said. The bank representatives are early. I saw their car pull up at the gate a minute ago. They are coming to do the walkthrough. They are coming to secure the asset. I walked to the window. A black sedan was driving up the driveway, followed by a locksmith's van. You have 15 minutes, I said. I suggest you grab your jewelry, Mom. Although if I recall, you kept the good stuff in the safe. And we all know that is empty. I turned and walked toward the hallway. Where are you going? My father shouted. I am going to let them in, I said over my shoulder. I am the owner of the intellectual property, but I am also a witness to the bankruptcy of the estate. I have some paperwork to sign with the bank. I promised them I would give them the keys. You have the keys, Bianca shrieked. I held up a set of keys. Not the ones they had changed yesterday. The old ones. The ones Grandpa gave me 5 years ago. The master keys. I never lost them, I said. I walked down the hall, leaving them screaming in the dining room. I could hear them blaming each other. I could hear my mother shrieking at my father for his failed investments. I could hear Bianca screaming at Jamal for not being a better lawyer. They were tearing each other apart just as Grandpa predicted. I opened the front door. 2 men in suits were standing there looking serious. Behind them, a locksmith was holding a drill. Good morning, I said to the bankers. I am Evelyn Vance. I believe you are here for the keys. Ms. Vance, the lead banker, said, nodding respectfully. We received your file. The debt audit was very helpful. We are prepared to secure the property. I handed him the keys. The occupants are in the dining room, I said. They are a little emotional. You might want to give them a moment. But make sure they do not take the silver. It belongs to the bank now. The banker took the keys. Thank you, Ms. Vance. We will handle it from here. I walked past them down the steps and into the fresh air. The sun was high in the sky now. The storm was over. The nightmare was over. I got into my Audi. I looked at the rearview mirror. I saw my mother running out the front door, chasing the bankers, her arms waving wildly. I saw my father slumping against the doorframe. I put the car in drive. I did not feel sad. I did not feel guilty. I felt light. I felt like I was floating. I had walked into that house as a ghost, and I was leaving as a queen. And the best part was, I had not spent a dime of my own money to destroy them. I had simply let them spend their own greed. I turned on the radio. It was a beautiful day in Chicago, and I had $1 billion drug to manage. As I stood by the open front door, holding the doorframe while the bank representatives waited respectfully on the porch, The screaming inside the dining room shifted pitch. It went from the collective wail of a family losing their fortune to the sharp, jagged sound of a marriage breaking into pieces. I watched as Bianca grabbed Jamal's lapels, her knuckles white. Her face was a mask of running mascara and terror. "Fix this," she shrieked, shaking him. "You are a lawyer. Do something. File an injunction. Stop them. We cannot lose the house. Where are we going to live?" Jamal did not move to comfort her. He stood like a statue, his eyes cold and distant, looking over her head at the empty walls. He was doing math. I could see it in his face. He was calculating liabilities. He was calculating risk. And he was calculating exactly how much his wife was now worth to him. The answer was obviously negative. "Get off me," Jamal said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through her hysteria like a knife. He reached up and peeled her fingers off his suit jacket one by one, as if he were removing a sticky child. He smoothed the fabric down, looking at it with more concern than he had ever shown for me, or even for her. "What do you mean, get off me?" Bianca stammered, stepping back, her hands hovering in the air. "We need to go. We need to pack. You need to call the movers." "I am not calling anyone," Jamal said. "And we are not going anywhere. I am going. You are staying here to explain to the bank why you tried to sell a car you did not own." Bianca froze. My parents, who had been huddled together crying, stopped and looked up. "What are you talking about?" Richard asked, his voice trembling. "You are her husband. You have to help her." Husband Jamal laughed, a dry, barking sound that had no humor in it. "I married an heiress, Richard. I married into a dynasty. Or at least that is what you sold me. You told me Henry Vance was worth 9 figures. You told me the estate was liquid. You told me I was marrying into security." He turned his glare on Bianca, who was shrinking away from him. "Instead, I married a fraud. I married a woman with $200,000 in credit card debt who just committed felony fraud on a live stream. Do you know what that does to my career, Bianca? Do you know what happens when the partners at the firm see that video? I am toxic. My reputation is in the toilet because I listened to you. But we love each other." Bianca whispered, tears spilling fresh down her cheeks. "We are a team. We were a merger." Jamal corrected her brutally. "And the merger failed. The assets were overstated, the liabilities were hidden, and I am exercising my right to dissolve the partnership." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times, then held it up. "I just sent a text to my assistant," he said. "She is drafting the divorce papers right now. I am filing for an annulment based on fraud. I am not going down with this ship, Bianca. And I am certainly not spending the next 20 years paying off your shoe collection with my salary." "Divorce!" Bianca screamed, the sound tearing at her throat. "You cannot divorce me. We have been married for 6 months. And it was the worst investment of my life," Jamal said. He turned to walk away, but Bianca lunged at him. She grabbed his arm, her nails digging in, desperate to hold on to the last piece of her perfect life. "You coward," she shrieked. "You user. You only wanted the money. You are just like them." Jamal spun around and shoved her. It was not a gentle push. He threw his arm out violently, breaking her grip and sending her stumbling backward. She tripped over her own feet and fell hard onto the parquet floor, landing in a heap of white silk and misery. "Yes, I wanted the money," Jamal shouted, standing over her, his face twisted with contempt. "Because that is all you have to offer, Bianca. You are not smart, you are not kind, you are not talented, you are just a spoiled brat with expensive taste and a mean streak a mile wide. Without the money, you are nothing." My father stepped forward, his fists clenched, trying to summon some last shred of paternal instinct. "Do not you touch her," he warned, his voice shaking. "Get out of my house." "It is not your house," Jamal sneered, straightening his tie. "It is the bank's house. And soon it will be Evelyn's house." He looked at me then, standing by the door. His eyes met mine. There was no apology in them, only a cold recognition of game respecting game. "You played it well, Evelyn," he said. "You waited until we were all inside the trap before you sprung it. I underestimated you." I did not say anything, I just watched him. He walked past me. He walked past the bankers on the porch. He walked down the steps to his BMW. He got in and drove away, leaving tire marks on the gravel. Inside the house, Bianca lay on the floor, sobbing into the rug. My mother was kneeling beside her, stroking her hair, murmuring meaningless comforts. My father stood alone in the center of the room, looking at the empty space where his future used to be. The family was destroyed. The money was gone. The house was gone. The marriage was gone. I looked at the lead banker. He looked uncomfortable, witnessing the domestic carnage. "They are all yours," I said. I turned and walked to my car. As I closed the door, I could still hear Bianca wailing. It was a sound of total, absolute loss. She had lost her inheritance, her home, and her husband in the span of 30 minutes. But as I drove away, I felt no pity. She had been willing to let me sleep in the snow. She had been willing to let me lose my career. She had been willing to erase my existence. She was just finally feeling the cold that she had forced me to live in for 5 years. And unlike me, she did not have a coat. I looked at my watch. The crystal face gleamed in the sunlight that was now flooding the room, illuminating the wreckage of what used to be a family. Jamal's tires were still fading in the distance, but there was another sound approaching. A heavy diesel engine, the bank's asset recovery team. "It is 11 a.m. I announced, my voice cutting through Bianca's sobbing like a bell. They all looked up. My mother was clutching a throw pillow as if it were a life preserver. My father was staring at the empty wine bottle. "The foreclosure team is parked at the gate," I said. "They are giving you a professional courtesy because I asked them to. They are waiting exactly 60 minutes before they come in with the padlocks and the inventory tags." 60 minutes, my father croaked. "To do what?" "To get your trash out of my grandfather's house," I said. I pointed to the door. "Anything that is not out of this house by noon becomes the property of the bank. And since I am the primary creditor for the estate via the trust, it essentially becomes mine. So if you want to keep your fake designer bags, Bianca, or your golf clubs, Richard, I suggest you start running." For a second, they just stared at me, paralyzed by the sheer drop in their status. Yesterday they were masters of the universe. Today they were squatters facing an eviction clock. Then panic set in. It was ugly. It was visceral. Bianca scrambled up from the floor, slipping on her high heels. She did not look at me. She did not look at her parents. She ran for the stairs. "My shoes!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "My Louboutins!" My mother dropped the pillow and lunged for the display cabinet. She started grabbing figurines, silver picture frames, anything she could fit into her oversized handbag. "Susan, stop!" my father yelled, finding a sudden burst of energy. "Leave the knickknacks. Get the files. Get the safe box from the bedroom." They scattered like cockroaches when the kitchen light turns on. The dignity they had worn like armor for 30 years evaporated instantly. I stood in the foyer and watched the show. It was a masterclass in greed and desperation. I heard the sound of drawers being ripped out upstairs. I heard the clatter of hangers being thrown onto the floor. Bianca came running down the stairs. 5 minutes later, her arms overflowing with dresses, shoes dangling from her fingers by their straps. She was not packing. She was looting her own life. She ran out the front door to her Porsche, threw the pile into the back seat, and ran back inside without closing the car door. My father came down carrying a box of cigars and a painting he had taken off the wall. "That belongs to the house, Richard," I said calmly. "It is listed on the mortgage schedule as a fixture. Put it back or the bank will charge you with theft." He froze. He looked at the painting. It was a portrait of a horse he had never ridden. He sneered and dropped it on the floor, the frame cracking. "You are enjoying this, are not you?" he spat. "I am managing the transition," I said. "That is my job. My mother was the worst. She was trying to drag a fur coat and a jewelry box down the stairs at the same time. She tripped on the hem of the coat and slid the last 3 steps, landing in a heap of mink and misery. She did not even cry out. She just scrambled up, clutching the box, terrified that I would take it from her. 40 minutes, I called out. The pace increased. It became a frenzy. They were sweating now. Their expensive clothes were stained with sweat and dust. They were fighting over space in the cars. "There is no room for my golf clubs," my father shouted from the driveway. "Move your damn shoes, Bianca." "I am not moving my shoes," she screamed back from the balcony. "Leave the clubs." You cannot afford to play golf anymore anyway. It was brutal. It was poetic. They were turning on each other over material scraps, proving exactly why grandfather had hidden the real treasure from them. They had no loyalty. They had no love. They only had things. And now they barely had those. I walked out onto the porch to watch the finale. The driveway looked like a yard sale gone wrong. Clothes were spilling out of trunks. Boxes were stacked haphazardly on leather seats. My mother was sitting in the passenger seat of the BMW, clutching her jewelry box to her chest, staring straight ahead, refusing to look at the house she had lost. Bianca made one last run. She came out carrying a heavy box. She looked at me as she passed. Her makeup was ruined. Her hair was a mess. She looked like a ghost of the girl who had stormed into my office yesterday. "You win," she whispered. "Are you happy?" I looked at the chaos. I looked at the fear in their eyes. "I am not happy, Bianca," I said. "I am relieved." The sound of a heavy engine rumbling up the drive signaled the end. The bank van pulled up next to my Audi. 2 men got out carrying clipboards and a large ring of keys. "Time is up," I said. My father slammed his trunk shut. It would not close all the way because of a coat sticking out. He did not care. He got into the driver's seat. Bianca threw her box into her passenger seat and climbed in. They did not say goodbye. They did not wave. They just started their engines and reversed out of the driveway, tires kicking up gravel, fleeing the scene of their own destruction. I watched them go. I watched the taillights disappear through the iron gates. The lead banker walked up the steps. "Miss Vance," he said, "the property is secured." "Thank you," I said. I turned back to the empty hallway. The painting my father had dropped was still on the floor. I picked it up. I dusted it off. I hung it back on the wall. Finally, I thought, the house is clean. 6 months is a long time when you are poor. Just ask Bianca, because I saw her last week. I did not speak to her, but I saw her working the checkout line at a discount grocery store on the south side, wearing a green polyester vest that was 3 sizes too big. Her hair, which used to be professionally blown out 3 times a week, was pulled back in a frizzy ponytail as a customer yelled at her about an expired coupon. Bianca looked tired and old, and exactly like the rest of us. Jamal had divorced her 2 weeks after the eviction, citing irreconcilable differences, though the court documents cited fraud, leaving her with half the credit card debt and none of the assets. So she lives in a studio apartment above a laundromat now after selling her engagement ring to pay the security deposit. My parents did not fare much better as the bankruptcy proceedings were public and brutal, resulting in the bank taking the condo and the summer house and the cars, and even garnishing my father's pension to pay off the deficiency judgment. They live in a small rental unit near the airport. Now the kind of place where you can hear the planes landing all night long, but the worst part for them is not the poverty, it is the silence. Their phones stopped ringing the day the foreclosure notice went up, and the country club revoked their membership, and their friends, the people they spent 30 years trying to impress, pretend they do not exist. I saw my mother at the pharmacy the other day, counting change to pay for her prescription, and when she saw me, she started to raise her hand, maybe to wave, maybe to beg, but I just put on my sunglasses and walked to my Audi R8, the one I bought with my own money. As for the mansion, it sat empty for 3 months because the bank tried to sell it, but the debt load was too toxic and no investor wanted to touch a property with $18 million of baggage, so it went to a foreclosure auction on the courthouse steps. I was there with Arthur, and I was the only bidder, so I bought my grandfather's estate for $9 million, which was less than half of what it was worth, and I paid cash. I did not move back in, not really because I did not want to sleep in the rooms where they had plotted against me or eat at the table where they had called me bloodless. Instead, I transformed it by gutting the interior and tearing down the walls that held so many secrets, turning the estate into the headquarters of the Henry Vance Foundation. The East Wing, where my parents used to sleep, is now a dormitory for foster children who have aged out of the system, where we provide them with housing education and job training, while the garage where the Shelby used to sit is now a science lab where we teach coding and robotics to scholarship students, and the ballroom where Bianca wanted to hold her galas is now a community center. The house is full of life, now full of noise and full of children who know what it feels like to be unwanted and who are finally finding a place where they belong, which is exactly what Henry would have wanted. I am sitting in the garden now, in the late afternoon, as the sun sets over the lake, casting long golden shadows across the lawn where the roses are blooming, because I fired the old landscaping crew and hired a local company owned by a man who used to be in the foster system. I have a cup of Earl Grey tea on the table next to me, which was grandfather's favorite, and a stack of grant checks and scholarships and funding for a new wing at the Children's Hospital in front of me. I sign my name at the bottom of each one, Evelyn Vance, and the name feels heavy with responsibility, but light with purpose. I pause and look up at the house, hearing laughter coming from the open windows of the computer lab and seeing students walking across the lawn carrying books and dreams. People ask me if I feel guilty, or if I feel bad for destroying my family, or if I ever think about reaching out. I take a sip of tea that is warm and comforting. I think about the night they locked me out in the snow and the way my mother looked at me when she told the funeral guests I was a hired nurse, and Bianca's smirk when she kicked open my office door. And then I look at the check in front of me for a young girl named Maya who is 17 and wants to be a biochemist and has no parents and no money, but has a brain and a heart. I sign the check. No, I do not feel guilty. I feel balanced, like the scales have finally tipped in the right direction, because my family wanted a legacy and wanted to be remembered, and they will be as the cautionary tale, and the reason this foundation exists. In a way, they finally did something good because they gave me the motivation to build this. I put the pen down and closed the checkbook, leaning back in my chair and closing my eyes to listen to the sound of the wind in the trees. The bloodline ended with them, but the family, the real family, is just getting started. I am Evelyn Vance, and I am the bloodless heiress, and I am finally home. The story of Evelyn Vance teaches us a profound and necessary lesson about the true definition of family and the inevitable consequences of greed. For decades, Evelyn's adoptive parents and sister used the concept of bloodline as a weapon to marginalize her, believing that DNA granted them an inherent right to respect and wealth they never earned. They viewed relationships as transactions and people as disposable utilities. However, the ultimate outcome proves that true legacy is not transmitted through genetics but through character. Grandfather Henry didn't leave his life's work to Evelyn because of a legal loophole. He left it to her because she was the only one who possessed the integrity to protect it. The story illustrates that you cannot build a secure future on a foundation of lies and entitlement. Bianca and her parents spent their lives chasing the appearance of wealth rather than the substance of it, and when the storm came, their house of cards collapsed. Furthermore, Evelyn's journey is a powerful testament to the importance of self-worth and boundaries. She teaches us that we do not owe our abusers forgiveness, access to our lives, or financial bailout simply because of a shared history. Walking away is not an act of cruelty, it is an act of self-preservation. By refusing to save her family from the consequences of their own actions, Evelyn allowed justice to take its natural course. The bloodless daughter turned out to be the only one with a heart, proving that the family you choose through mutual respect and love is infinitely stronger than the one that treats you as an option. If you believe that family is defined by how they treat you, rather than just a last name, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories where justice is finally served.